Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about P.G. Wodehouse's Blandings Castle. Now, this particular edition, it has 6 Blandings Castle stories, 1 Bobby Wickham story, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 The Moliners of Hollywood stories. I just read the Blandings Castle stories because that was the bit that I was interested in. So this is very much a review of those stories. Now, I was first introduced to Blandings with the Timothy Spall TV series, which I absolutely love. It's in my top 3 favorite TV shows of all time. Go out and watch it if you haven't. And so it's interesting to then come to Wodehouse's writing from that show, because while there are a lot of similarities, it's the same basic content, right? And the stories in this collection: Custody of the Pumpkin, Lord Emsworth Acts for the Best, Pig Hooey, Company for Gertrude the Go-Getter, and Lord Emsworth and the Girlfriend. These are all episodes of the TV series. But there are some differences. In some cases, substantial differences between what we get in the short stories and what we get in the TV show. So before I talk about many of those, the basic sort of world of Blandings Castle, we follow Lord Emsworth and primarily his son, Freddie Threepwood. Lord Emsworth is a sort of absent-minded, bumbling country squire. He loves nature, he loves gardens, he loves plants, flowers. He has his beloved pig, the Empress of Blandings, with whom he continually attempts to win blue ribbons at the Shropshire show. And he runs into sort of all of these difficulties, in part because of it. Well, in the stories, in large part because of his son Freddie, who often needs money or some sort of assistance, often involving financial difficulties or women. He has to sort of negotiate with his gardener, Angus McAllister, to keep McAllister on at Blandings. And all these sorts of things, all these sorts of difficulties that interrupt Lord Emsworth's sort of tranquil, ideal life in the country. So I'm going to start by reading you the first bit of the Custody of the Pumpkin, the first story in this collection. It sets the stage, I think. I'm going to read you a decent chunk of it, about 2.5 pages. But it sets the stage. It starts giving you a sense of who Lord Emsworth is. And I think it gives you a sense also of the humor that Wodehouse brings to his writing, because he's one of the great comic writers of 20th century English literature. So this is the start of the Custody of the Pumpkin. The morning sunshine descended like an amber shower bath on Blandings Castle, lighting up with a heartening glow its ivied walls, its rolling parks, its gardens, outhouses, and messuages, as such of its inhabitants as chanced at that moment to be taking the air. It fell on green lawns and wide terraces, on noble trees and bright flower beds. It fell on the baggy trousers seat of Angus McAllister, head gardener to the 9th Earl of Emsworth, as he bent with dour Scottish determination to pluck a slug from its reverie beneath a leaf of lettuce. It fell on the white flannels of the Honourable Freddie Threepwood, Lord Emsworth's second son, hurrying across the water meadows. It also fell on Lord Emsworth himself, and on Beach, his faithful butler. They were standing on the turret above the west wing, the former with his eye to a powerful telescope, the latter holding the hat which he had been sent to fetch. "Beach," said Lord Emsworth. "My lord, I've been swindled. This dashed thing doesn't work." Your lordship cannot see clearly? I can't see at all, Dashit. It's all black. The butler was an observant man. Perhaps if I were to remove the cap at the extremity of the instrument, my lord, more satisfactory results might be obtained. Eh? Cap? Is there a cap? So there is. Take it off, Beach. Very good, my lord. Ah. There was satisfaction in Lord Emsworth's voice. He twiddled and adjusted, and the satisfaction deepened. Yes, that's better. That's capital. Beach, I can see a cow. Indeed, my lord. Down in the water meadows. Remarkable. Might be 2 yards away. All right, Beach, shan't want you any longer. Your hat, my lord? Put it on my head. Very good, my lord. The butler, this kindly act performed, withdrew. Lord Emsworth continued gazing at the cow. The 9th Earl of Emsworth was a fluffy-minded and amiable old gentleman with a fondness for new toys. Although the main interest of his life was his garden, he was always ready to try a sideline, and the latest of these sidelines was this telescope of his. Ordered from London in a burst of enthusiasm consequent upon the reading of an article on astronomy in a monthly magazine, it had been placed in position on the previous evening. What was now in progress was its trial trip. Presently, the cow's audience appeal began to wane. It was a fine cow, as cows go, but like so many cows, it lacked sustained dramatic interest. Surfeited after a while by the spectacle of its chewing the cud and staring glassily at nothing, Lord Emsworth decided to swivel the apparatus round in the hope of picking up something a trifle more sensational. And he was just about to do so when into the range of his vision there came the Honourable Freddie. White and shining, he tripped along over the turf like a Theocritan shepherd, hastening to keep an appointment with a nymph, and a sudden frown marred the serenity of Lord Emsworth's brow. He generally frowned when he saw Freddie, for with the passage of the years that youth had become more and more of a problem to an anxious father. Unlike the male codfish, which, suddenly finding itself the parent of 3,500,000 little codfish, cheerfully resolves to love them all, the British aristocracy is apt to look with a somewhat jaundiced eye on its younger sons. And Freddie Threepwood was one of those younger sons who rather invited the jaundiced eye. It seemed to the head of the family that there was no way of coping with the boy. If he was allowed to live in London, he piled up debts and got into mischief. And when you jerked him back into the purer surroundings of Blandings Castle, he just mooned about the place, moping brutally. Hamlet society at Elsinore must have had much the same effect on his stepfather as did that of Freddie Threepwood at Blandings on Lord Emsworth. So again, you're getting sort of the set here. You're getting a sense of who these characters are. But it also introduces us to sort of the first real gap between what we see in the show and what we see in the stories. And that's Lord Emsworth's relationship with Freddie. Because in the show, they're much more congenial than they are in the stories. In the stories, it's a very antagonistic relationship. Lord Emsworth definitely is not a fan of Freddie in the stories, whereas in the show, there's a little bit of that. He tries to avoid Freddie frequently because he thinks that Freddie is going to ask for money, etc., etc., but there doesn't seem to be real malice there. Whereas in the stories, there are these moments where there's a kind of maliciousness to Lord Emsworth's treatment of or view of Freddie. So that's definitely a difference. And I like the Lord Emsworth of the TV show where there is no malice there. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't think of Emsworth as a malicious guy. But I mean, that is what it is in the stories. So we get that. Another major element that differs is that Freddie gets married to Niagara, or Aggie Donaldson, in the first story here. In Custody of the Pumpkin, first story in this collection, he gets married to Aggie Donaldson, and he's married to her throughout the stories. In the TV series, he meets her, and they plan to elope in the final episode of the series. He is unmarried throughout the rest of them. And so he continually pursues women in each episode of the series. He is interested in whatever woman happens to be around. In these stories, that's definitely not the case. He's less of a womanizer, which I guess in a way is good, actually. It's a problematic element of Freddy's character in the show, but you sort of build these romance plots into them. So there's a couple of other things that I want to take you through. Just a couple of moments that I particularly like. So one is in Pig Hui. So this is a story in which Lord Emsworth's pigman gets arrested for basically drunk and disorderly. And the pig, the Empress, refuses to eat. The pigman, well-beloved, Cyril well-beloved, he has a distinct call and apparently this is the norm for pigs. I don't know if this is the norm in reality, but in the story, this is the norm. Each pigman has his own distinct call. And so without well-beloved around, the Empress refuses to eat. At the same time, there is a love triangle between Angela, who is Lord Emsworth's niece, Heacham, who is her betrothed, and what's the other guy's name? Belford. Sorry. Jimmy Belford, who Constance, Lord Emsworth's sister, does not want Angela to marry, but Angela wants to marry. So Angela wants to marry Belford, but she's broken off her engagement to Heacham. Heacham wants to marry her. Lord Emsworth has to sort it out, and he doesn't want to and doesn't care about it. But we get this moment. Heacham has shown up. He's trying to talk to Lord Emsworth about Angela, but Emsworth's mind is on the Empress and the dilemma of her not eating, with the fat pig contest coming up at the Shropshire show. So Lord Emsworth says, "Tell me, my dear fellow, what are your views on linseed meal?" "What do you mean, linseed meal?" "Why, linseed meal," said Lord Emsworth, not being able to find a better definition, "as food for pigs." "Oh, curse all pigs." "What?" There was a sort of astounded horror in Lord Emsworth's voice. He had never been particularly fond of young Heacham, for he was not a man who took much to his juniors, but he had not supposed him capable of anarchistic sentiments like this. "What did you say?" "I said curse all pigs. You keep talking about pigs. I'm not interested in pigs. I don't want to discuss pigs. Blast and damn every pig in existence." Lord Emsworth watched him as he strode away, with an emotion that was partly indignation and partly relief. Indignation that a landowner and a fellow son of Shropshire should have brought himself to utter such words, and relief that one capable of such utterance was not going to marry into his family. He had always, in his woolly-headed way, been very fond of his niece Angela, and it was nice to think that the child had such solid good sense and so much cool discernment. Many girls of her age would have been carried away by the glamour of young Heacham's position and wealth, but she, divining with an intuition beyond her years that he was unsound on the subject of pigs, had drawn back while there was still time and refused to marry him. So again, this is one of those moments where Wodehouse's humor really sort of comes to the fore. The excessive devotion of Emsworth to the Empress, and this failure to understand or appreciate why Angela is not marrying Heacham, the assumption that she doesn't want to marry him for the same reason that Lord Emsworth has now soured on him. Again, it's this ironic humor combined with Wodehouse's wit as a writer that makes this really, really funny. So there's actually just one more thing I want to talk about. And that's another distinction, another gap between the show and the stories as they're presented here. And that's to do with the story The Go-Getter. Because it's completely different. I mean, there's some elements that are the same, but by and large, it is completely different. Freddie Threepwood is attempting to sell Donaldson's dog Joy, the dog food sold by his father-in-law. So that remains the same. The Donaldson's dog Joy, that bit remains the same. But in the show, really the key element of it is a character named Baxter, who is engaged by Constance as Lord Emsworth's private secretary, somebody who is meant to sort of get his affairs in order and make sure that everything is very tightly controlled, tightly regimented, which is completely the opposite of Emsworth's style. Baxter is completely absent from the story. He's not in the short story at all. He's the central antagonist of the TV episode, but he's completely not here at all. It's a really fascinating decision. I would love to sort of know the thought process, that went into putting him into that episode in the TV series. Because I think Baxter is a character in the short stories and the novels, just not in that one. So it's interesting. I don't know why he ends up in this one, but he is the central figure there without being in the stories.